will it be enough to save his job? The most senior aide to the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has defended travelling 400 kilometres across England during the pandemic lockdown, saying his actions were both reasonable and legal. At a press conference in the garden of number 10 Downing Street, Dominic Cummings justified his journeys on health grounds. But his statement has left a number of unanswered questions and failed to silence calls for his resignation. Richard Good reports.
He's not used to taking centre stage, and Dominic Cummings didn't engage with the small crowd that had gathered to see him return home. There's been no precedent for an advisor to hold a press conference in the Rose Garden of number 10 Downing Street. But if the British public was hoping Cummings would apologise over his extensive travels during the country's lockdown, it would be disappointed.
In this very complex situation, I tried to exercise my judgment the best I could. I believe that in all the circumstances I behaved reasonably and legally, balancing the safety of my family and the extreme situation in number 10 and the public interest in effective government to which I could contribute.
Boris Johnson has laid his own authority on the line by backing Cummings, and he once again stepped in to support his trusted advisor.
I do not believe that anybody in number 10 has done anything to undermine our messaging. What we want to make absolutely clear to the public is that the only way to solve this problem is if we stay alert, follow the guidelines, control the virus and save lives.
Cabinet heavyweights Dominic Raab and Michael Gove both chipped in on Twitter to show their support for Cummings, saying he had done nothing wrong. Cummings explained he travelled 400 kilometres north so that his extended family could care for his 4-year-old son, and drove to a beauty spot to test his eyesight. His critics, among them 20 Conservative MPs, are calling for him to be sacked. Cummings says that's up to the Prime Minister.
Well, for the latest developments and the fallout, let's go to London to speak to our reporter, Tig Enright. Tig, morning to you. Really, the UK government wanted to draw a line under this, and that's in part what yesterday's press conference was all about. Did they manage to do that?
Hi, Rosie. Yeah, that was clearly the hope. The timing of this press conference at the end of a bank holiday weekend, during which the newspaper headlines were dominated by this scandal. Down to some pretty good choreography by the journalists who first published the story late on Friday, helping it to dominate Saturday, and then drip feeding more details, more embarrassing details on Sunday too. But the message that Dominic Cummings delivered at that unusual press conference was effectively the same, that he claims he did nothing wrong and he made no apology, even though he did try and put more of a human face, a family face onto the scandal, talking about the issues within his family. This coming from a man who the public normally sees shouting at or belittling journalists as they try to ask him questions outside his home. So just to get a sense as to how the morning newspapers are treating this story, The Guardian, which is one of those which helped to break it, saying, "I don't regret what I did," and talking about Cummings refusing to quit. What's really interesting, though, is at the other end of the political spectrum, the Daily Mail. You couldn't get a more non-Guardian newspaper. It's traditionally a Conservative supporting newspaper, and it continues its call for Dominic Cummings to resign, a call that it first made yesterday, saying no apology, no regrets. Now, this is a story in the Sun newspaper, which is the most widely read paper in Britain, that Downing Street wants us to focus on. Yes, there is a mention of Dominic Cummings, but this is what Downing Street wants the readers to focus on. Open for business, the next stage in relaxing Britain's lockdown. But whether or not they managed to keep Dominic Cummings out of the headline depends on many factors. Whether or not there are more juicy nuggets to be unearthed, and I imagine all those newspapers have reporters combing the ground in Durham looking for more evidence of Dominic Cummings' day trips. There certainly will be a far more intense spotlight on his behaviour. He is somebody who is known to be quite unusual in political circles, who does like to operate in the shadows. It will have introduced him to a whole group of people in this country who had not necessarily heard him before, and reignited old tensions with political rivals. But as he says, and as we all know, there is only one man who has his fate in his hands, and that is the Prime Minister.
Tig, thank you very much for the update live for us outside of London.